Hi and welcome to the 5th Speak Up by Smiley Movement. Today we are talking about how to tackle poverty. I've got some amazing guests with me today from a bunch of different charities and yeah, we're just going to talk about some of the issues surrounding poverty that we're currently facing in the UK, including the cost of living crisis and homelessness, and we're going to talk about some of the solutions that we are working on to try and fix them. Just to kick things off, guys, first I just really want to ask, I think probably the most important question is, how do we support people experiencing poverty in ways that empower them and don't take agency away from them? Obviously, poverty is a very broad term. We've got a lot of different representatives from a lot of different places in the poverty sort of tackling sector at the moment. But if you guys give me a little bit of your personal expertise from your sector, that'd be great. So yeah, how do we support people experiencing poverty in ways that empower them? You're looking at me, so do you want to go first?
I was looking at you out.
Yeah.
So I'm from ActionAid UK, and we're an international organisation that works with women and girls who live in poverty across Asia, Latin America and Africa. And basically, we align ourselves with them, we support women in order to challenge all those structural issues that means that they are in this situation of poverty. But we don't empower anyone. The women and girls we work with are fizzing with ideas and creativity and solutions. So I guess the most important thing is the way in which we work with women and girls. So we take their lead. We say to them, okay, tell us about what you would identify as the main issues you're facing. What do you say are the solutions, and how do you want to realise those solutions? And then we do what we can, whatever they ask, to help with that. Usually cash or funding. I guess a couple of really direct examples of that. In Senegal, we did some funding for training, and it was training about, women came to us and they said, we want to do cooperative farming. So it's great, okay. What do you want? Seeds, tools, support for livestock. So it was community-led training that we funded. In Sierra Leone, community-led training on how to make soap. And the important thing, speaking direct to this issue of poverty and not having money, is it was about women having their own livelihoods, having their ownership, having their autonomy and power over their lives. Yeah.
I like that a lot, because you're sort of giving them the agency and just saying, what can we do to help, rather than coming in guns blazing, trying to fix problems that are already there.
Yeah.
So I really like that you're sort of letting them take the lead on it. What about you, Aileen? What are your sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love what you were saying about not empowering people because they already know what they want to do. Felix project is very similar. So the food that we rescue and redistribute would, if we weren't there, go to waste. But what we see ourselves as doing is working with the community organisations and primary schools that we support in London so that they can do more of the work that they're set up to do. We are experts in getting food from A to B, that's it. The community organisations that are deep within some of the most deprived areas of London know exactly what the people that they work with need. I think it's really interesting. The schools that we work with, for example, the head teachers are saying to us, we've identified the 10 or 20 families who are most in need because we know those kids and we know those families. So we very much sort of say, listen, we'll get you as much food as you need, as much food as we can. You decide what you do with it. And whether that's making up food parcels that people come and collect, whether that's feeding people, at a bingo night or something, or whether that's having cooking classes for young kids to come, mother and baby session where you can just come and have a cup of tea and a biscuit. It's everything, and we just facilitate that activity for them. So we're putting to good use food which was meant for people to eat and which at the moment is either ending up in landfill or being burnt for anaerobic digestion. And what everyone decides to do with it is completely up to them. So we're just saving them a bit of money on their budget, which is really important for them, because a lot of these charities are running at, 100 grand a year as a budget. So that's what we see our role as. We don't get involved in anything else. We just get food as much food as we can out to as many community organisations.
I like that a lot. And Kate, obviously you work with Save the Children, you work with children and families, and I guess that changes the conversation about agency and empowerment, because a lot of them are restricted by age and by legal confines. So I guess, what's it like from your perspective?
Yeah, that is true. We have to work very, very hard to make sure children's voices are put out there as much as possible. So I work with children, teenagers, parents and grandparents as well. Family units are very diverse and complex, and we have lots of voices that are always talking, within one family size. And when it comes to trying to make sure that children's voices are heard, we've got to be really careful, because if families are growing up in poverty around the world, it can be very, very shaming, and it's very shaming sometimes in the UK perspective. And you want to make sure that someone feels like they're able to speak, but that there isn't going to be loads of judgment. So you have to be really, really careful with social media. And if we're going to be speaking to children and getting their ideas and voices, we'll do it in a way that protects their identity as much as possible. So we do lots of things with drawings, we do lots of things with diaries, we do things with just the odd phrase or word, or we'll just do things with play. And then through that, you can then speak to their parents and maybe speak to their older siblings and speak to people that basically have, they're legally able to talk because they're over 18, and they've got a bit more knowledge about how they're talking about their lives and what the sort of repercussions might be. With families, and in particular in Manchester, we've done a lot of work where we've got parents to keep diaries about the cost of living crisis. They were able to sort of talk about prices, energy bills, how much their shopping was going up, but really importantly, it was about how it made them feel. And I think being able to then communicate that in the media was quite a powerful way of doing it. And we also try very, very hard to make sure that parents are able to go in front of politicians as much as possible. So if we have a round table in Westminster, sometimes we try and support parents to give evidence to select committees. And that's a really, really powerful way of getting people with lived experience to speak to people that have a tiny amount of power to try and change things. But you are right, when it comes to children, you're not putting them out there, you're not trying to get them to do anything, but it's about being in their world and listening to how they see things, and it will be different to what you think, and it's always very, very inspiring.
I guess that kind of brings us quite nicely onto you, Isabella, because obviously you're from slightly more my side of the fence than these guys. As a reporter, as somebody who actually goes out and sort of listens to the stories and reports on them, I guess your views on sort of empowerment and agency around poverty and the cost of living crisis are quite different.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say. I think for me, listening to people and really hearing their voices and amplifying their voices is so important for empowering them. And I think at the big issue as well, that's what we try to do. We put our vendors, who are people who are experiencing homelessness and experiencing poverty, we put them at the centre. And it's exactly what you were saying about autonomy. It's so important to be able to kind of sell the magazine. That gives them a chance to make money, but it also gives them the tools to go on with life, to make them more employable and have those skills, which is really, really important. But also something else that I think is so important for empowering people experiencing poverty is that they actually have the money they need to live. And people at the moment, benefits just aren't enough. I think it's the Trussell Trust and the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, they found that benefits claimants are £35 less a week.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're not able to survive. That's just for the essentials. And if they don't have the money to live, how are they supposed to be empowered? So I think first and foremost, it comes down to money.
And that was going to be my next question. What are some of the obstacles, not only to empowerment and making your way out of poverty and making your way out of whatever difficult, dire situations you might be in that concerns money, but also what are some of the obstacles to accessing that help? Like you said, benefits just don't cut it anymore. With the cost of living crisis and inflation, benefits just haven't risen to meet it. If they ever did qualify for enough to survive on, to live on. So yeah, what are some of the obstacles that people are facing right now in accessing help, whether that's from charities like you guys or from the government? I don't know if anybody has any immediate thoughts.
I think a massive one that I've noticed is shame. So I've visited quite a few food banks, which are at breaking point anyway. And there's an amazing food bank, Earlsfield Food Bank, and I visited them, and a week before, a mother had been there, and the week before that, she was rifling through bins to try and find food for her children. like that's not okay because she was too ashamed. So we really need to break down that shame, I think, and poverty can happen to anyone. It just takes kind of one thing going wrong in your life, whether that's illness, whether that's losing your job. So I think combating that shame and making sure people feel like they're not alone is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something that we're seeing in the UK space is how inadequate the benefit system is, which I think is something you've already addressed. And particularly we're looking at the 2-child limit, which sounds like it doesn't really explain what it is, but it's being bandied around in the media a lot at the moment, the 2-child limit. So if you're on a very low income and you are in receipt of benefits and you have children, you're able to get a payment to help you raise your child. But that only stretches as far as the first child and the second child. If you have a third child, you don't get that support from the government. And at Save the Children, we are very, very keen to try and overturn that. We think it's unfair just because the order that you were born, it means that you actually end up having less money. It's also unfair on the first child and the second child because, you know, if less money is going into the family for more children, you've got to try and make that stretch, and inevitably it's impossible to do that. So yeah, the 2-child limit is something that we really, really think needs to go. We're very, very hopeful that Labour adopt that into their manifesto. We'd be very keen for them to do that. And of course, we'd like the government, the Conservative government, to get rid of it. It was a policy they introduced. It's expensive, there is a lot of criticism around it, but ultimately putting more money into families is the way forward. And families come in loads of different shapes and sizes. People get divorced, people split up, people have new partners, blended families. We need to look at what modern Britain is and try and, you know, come up with a solution that works for families today.
If I may, sorry, like, as I recall when that came in as well, one of the most appalling, shiver-inducing aspects of it was that it was forcing women into a position sometimes of having to say that a child was the product of rape. I mean, a policy that does that, astonishing, and the kid find that out who might never have known. I mean, what sort of world is this? And I totally agree with you about that has got to go.
Yeah, like number one, that has to go.
that is quite a horrifying, you know, almost dystopian realisation, because that's not something that I had heard. You know, obviously I try and keep up with these things in my job, but, you know, if even that sort of thing isn't necessarily making it through to the masses, then how can we even understand?
We're also hearing anecdotally that, you know, if a parent is pregnant with their third baby, that they're very, very anxious about informing the DWP, their job coach, and you're supposed to be looking forward to the birth of a new child. Expanding a family is a nice thing, and suddenly you've got to go through all of this and get all your paperwork in order and then go and speak to the government about the fact you're pregnant. So we don't like this. We think it's a very, very inhumane way of going about things.
I think for us, I mean, obviously food poverty is a sort of micro world of poverty. It's what happens to people when their budgets become squeezed, because so many of the costs that people have are fixed cost, housing costs, bills, childcare, which I don't understand how anyone can afford to have a child in this country because childcare is so expensive. Yeah. Food budgets are often the only thing that are elastic, and we know people are buying less food, they are buying worse quality food, simply in order to feed their families enough. You know, for us, we're absolutely thrilled that the Mayor of London has granted free school meals to primary school children, but that needs to be happening UK-wide. There are hundreds of thousands of children whose parents don't qualify for free school meals and who are living in poverty. And a free school meal would at least let them have, you know, a hot, nutritious meal every day. So, you know, as well as we're seeing, you know, I'm sure Earlsfield Food Bank is seeing it too, all of the places we work with are experiencing more demand for their services. The food banks have actually seen a drop in donations because of the cost of living, even though actually people who use food banks are more likely to donate to them, which is a real sort of dichotomy that I find quite hard, but you know, they are seeing donations go down just at a point where more and more people need them. And if you get a referral to a food bank, there's sometimes a limit on how many times you can go. And so there's so many barriers that are in the way of people being able to access, particularly from where we come from with surplus food that is meant to be eaten. It was created to be fit for human consumption, and it is wasted. So that to me is a totally nuts way of having it, because we just want to get as much food as possible out. People are absolutely coming forward to say, I need this food, but there's just not enough of it to go around, and yeah, so many barriers in the way of people being able to feed themselves, feed their families, get enough nutritious food.
And how do we break down some of these barriers? Because I mean, you talked about campaigning, the government's campaigning, Labour as well as the Conservative current government, but like the shame and the just the issues with only being able to access life-saving food banks a certain number of times. I mean, that just seems ridiculous to me. Like, how do we, as not just as representatives of charities, but also just people living in this world that's starting to kind of sound like the Hunger Games, quite honestly. How do we start to break down those barriers?
It has to come from the top. I mean, there's a law in France that has been in place since 2016 that supermarkets over a certain size have to give away the food they don't sell to charities. Now, even in a country where they don't have the logistical support for those supermarkets to actually get that food out, so there aren't charities like Felix, like Fair Share, like Trotter Trust to be able to take it. Even so, the charities who use the food have seen a 30% increase since 2016 in the food coming from the supermarkets. Now, with the infrastructure that we already have in the UK, were that to be applied, we might see more and more food being, coming into our depots and therefore getting into the community. That said, we work with some fantastic suppliers, and so for us it's also just about making it as easy as possible to get their food. But yeah, I mean, we have to break down the shame of asking for help, and we have to make it easier for people to access help. The fact that universal credit only kicks in a month in arrears means that we are seeing and hearing from mums who are having to go to food banks for the first time in their lives because they've had a third child, they haven't been able to go back to work yet, they're in receipt of the benefit, but it hasn't come.
Yeah.
And so they are absolutely drip feeding whatever cash they've been able to save and relying on extra services like food banks. So those kind of, surely that's not that difficult to get sorted. Things like that would just, I think, have a huge overnight impact for people.
Absolutely.
I suppose in our context, because we work in the international context and specifically across Asia, Africa, Latin America, those obstacles are about all the toxic fudge that comes with poverty, because poverty is not just about a lack of money, right? It's about not having that, I hate this phrase, I feel like The Apprentice is in my head, but social capital, political power, right? Then you've got the structural stuff like women's work not being recognised or remunerated as it should be. Then you've got the intersectional issues that layer on top of that, like your sexuality, your gender, your race, your migrant status. And then just to top it off, we have things like, neoliberal capitalism, which in the context where we work, and to give that kind of a tangible feel, you've got international financial institutions saying to countries, we'll lend you some money, but on condition that you cut your public services. And that has a double effect on women because they tend to be the majority of workers in those services, and they tend to be most, reliant is not the word, but they use those services in particular, health, education, etc. And in terms of getting over those barriers, it's interesting on those obstacles, because it's not just about going to the top. It's very much about working with the women and the girls on a human rights-based approach. So actually, what are your human rights? What can we do? How can we facilitate a situation whereby people go and advocate for themselves, right? And for more rights as well. And also, how can people demand accountability from their elected representatives? How can people become decision makers? How can people become the politicians, Which might sound, like a big ask, but it's perfectly doable, it's perfectly possible. And we do a lot of widespread civic education as well on this stuff. And it does cut through, and it means that people, are able to take ever more control in their lives. So yeah, that human rights-based approach has been super important.
And from what I'm hearing, just from what you were saying there, it sounds like there's almost like I'd hesitate to use the word empowerment again, but like an education sort of point of like you can do this, this is how you can do this is how you can approach this.
Absolutely.
Almost giving permission to people to say, here's the information, you can use it.
Yeah, but what I would say is that it's women's rights organisations and feminist networks in those countries that have done decades of work on this, So it's often about, as I say, funding and facilitating the fantastic ideas and creative solutions on the ground and people running with it.
Almost being a back pushing on the people doing all the legwork, sort of saying, go on, be free, here's some money to go and be able to do what you want to do.
I mean, there was an amazing lawyer, and I hate the fact I can't remember exactly where she was, but she was talking to women, domestic workers, people in the informal sector, about their rights at work in terms of sexual harassment, what sexual harassment is, what it looks like, what you can do about it, She did all of that work and it was amazing. And we just kind of helped with the platform, funded stuff, but, all the change was from these women and girls, and it was awe-inspiring and transformative.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, like, from your guys' perspective, what are some of the ways that you think we might be more able to break down these barriers?
I think one of the biggest barriers is an economic barrier. And so I think there's three things. And again, I'm going to say it comes from the top and it's something that can be done. So look, we've talked about the 2-child limit. Getting rid of that, it would cost £1 billion a year to do it. So that number terrifies people. But when you think the welfare bill in the UK is £36 billion a year, then you need to look at it as in being a really, really worthwhile investment morally, but also, economically. And, the government goes on about productivity all the time. It's about making sure that people have the best possible start in life so that they can live the fullest lives possible. So you can make that economic argument all day long. Childcare, that definitely needs a huge financial investment. The government's talked about it. They want to do more, but there's always more that you can put into that space. It's foundational. And then the last thing that from parents I've spoken to, they want to work more, but they need hours that are between, in school time, so they need 10 till 2. And I think if the government focused a lot more on finding work hours that work for families, 10 to 2, you can still do the school pick up and drop off, then I think that would be quite life-changing for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll actually add to that on kind of the money you can generate from scrapping the 2-child limit. You can generate so much money just from savings for the NHS, for education, for getting a stronger workforce. And things like you mentioned earlier, the free school meals, expanding that to all primary school children, that would save billions for the economy. Poverty is so costly.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is forgotten. We get that kind of immediate cash injection, but it needs to be long-term solutions rather than just the sticking plasters. And something else I would mention with barriers is barriers to work, so accessibility. So people who are disabled, who have English as their second language, refugees, that's really important. At the Big Issue, we have a recruitment service called Big Issue Recruit, and that helps marginalised people get into work, overcome those barriers. But we need more support on a wider level. We need really kind of tailored support to those people.
Just when you were talking about the accessibility, we've talked a lot about universal credit and benefits. I guess, from my perspective, I've been on benefits before in my life, and I remember looking at all these forms to fill out. It's pages and pages and pages and pages of legal jargon and intrusive questions. And, my partner's disabled. She's recently had to fill out, redo her PIP assessment. We were on the phone for 2 hours, and it was basically, tell me all the reasons that you feel bad about yourself. And I was sat there listening to this conversation, and I was like, I can so understand why people either don't apply in the first place or can't get the full amount that they deserve.
Absolutely.
Because the system itself is so entangled and so messed up.
I'm doing quite a few stories at the moment on the DWP, the Disability Benefit System. And it's just horrific, some of the stories you hear, how broken it is, and people coming out feeling suicidal, the amount of people who fail their initial assessments just because they don't know how to do it, they don't know how to go through the process, and they're not getting that support. and they don't know how to communicate their issues because they're struggling with their mental health or they're struggling to communicate their health conditions. And it's really sad. But I think there are solutions, and there are reforms that can be made.
Absolutely. And I guess on that, one of my next questions, obviously, you know, with Smiley, we're about solutions, but we're also about positivity and sort of taking the time to take stock of all the good things that have happened so far, because I don't think you can underestimate the value of hope and the value that, you know, the courage and the energy that gives you going forward. So I don't know if you guys have any particular stories that like you want to share that you've seen or reported on, or, you know, been witness to of, you know, either success or hope or meaning, or, you know, anything that you, I think it's so easy in this sector to start to lose faith and start to lose hope and start to feel a bit like I'm writing the same stories all over again, you know.
I've got a lot of faith in the younger generation.
I'm so glad.
And
it's so good to
children
hear.
and teenagers and young people that I speak to. It's incredible, talented, vibrant, full of amazing ideas, and see the world in a way that actually they want to take part and participate and change it. So, you know, foundational kind of thing, I guess, if we've seen with the climate marches that started a few years ago, kids taking a Friday off and going in Westminster and campaigning all the time, and their interest in climate change is important, and they're passionate about it, much more passionate sometimes than people that are a lot older. And so if you've got that much passion as a teenager about that one issue, it really gives me faith that as they get older, they're going to be passionate about a whole load of other things.
Kids are great for that sort of thing, aren't
Kids
they?
are amazing.
Yeah. What about you, Isabella?
I think there are so many big issue vendors who are so inspiring and have made a real, change their lives around. One particular one who stands out is a man called Steve Wyatt, and he was struggling with heroin addiction, and he went to the big issue. It changed his life, and he became a furniture restorer, and a very successful one. And he's just opened a shop with Jay Blades, who's from the repair shop.
Wow,
Amazing. There are vendors who they're getting married and they're selling the magazine to raise money for their wedding, which is
that's so
lovely.
cute.
There are also, many of them go on to have successful jobs, but others just stay for decades because they really enjoy that stability, and they really love the job. They love meeting people and interacting.
I love that.
Which is lovely.
Oh, I guess I would give an example from Malawi, right? So I was talking about the nightmare of neoliberal economics, which is here too, right? In Malawi, there's young women and a group of LGBTQ plus people who have come together to lobby the government. So yeah, going to that level, you know, to say that we need a feminist wellbeing economy that puts people before profit. That is about taking care of the planet rather than gorging ourselves on its resources and destroying everyone in one go, you know, and recognising the value of women's work. We're supporting them through the advocacy that they want to do, building a movement behind that, and it's such important work, not only there, but right across the world, because the issues of patriarchy, are a particular problem. And thank you, Aileen, for saying patriarchy. You know what? I think just for 10 minutes being sat at a table with all women, it was like patriarchy went out my mind.
I'm sorry to bring it down.
But you're absolutely right. There's patriarchy in the context we work in. There's the colonial legacy, which is obviously hellish, right? Which includes patriarchy, levels of racism, all the rest of it. But those guys give me a lot of help. Also, we worked with this one called Gertruida in South Africa. She's a farmer. She was providing food to Tesco. A lot of shops, we get a lot of food out of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, weren't paying the farmers, the suppliers, the packers enough money. Eventually, after a big campaign with Gertruida and a bunch of other wonderful farmers, the government here introduced a watchdog to say, all of you guys buying this stuff, we're going to be watching that you pay people properly. Supply chains is a big issue. That happened, that worked, you know. So yeah, there's a ton of reason for hope. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I guess our success story is our growth. So when we started in 2016, we were delivering to 16 community organisations. We're now delivering 30 million meals a year to 1,000 community organisations. So from that point of view, my hope for the future is based in Jane and Justin Byam Shaw taking the tragedy of their son Felix's death, turning it into something incredibly positive for hundreds of thousands of people every year, and the support that we've managed to pick up along the way from food suppliers, from people who give to us, our supporters who are so generous, our volunteers who give up sometimes literally every day a week. There's a guy who drives a van for us in our Park Royal Depot. He used to work for Sainsbury's, and he came to us and said, I have seen the food going out of the back of Sainsbury's into a bin, and I was horrified. And he drives a van for us 6 days a week because he's retired, and he absolutely loves it. So, and going to visit the community organisations, seeing the work that they do, it's all about people looking after people, thinking what more that they can do for everybody. And that is literally built into the DNA of Felix, because it was Justin and Jane saying, what kind of person would Felix have been? What would he want to do as a young man? What do we want his legacy to be? And his legacy is going to be one of compassion and always trying to do more for as many people as possible in the community. So that for me, just, I think every day you go to work and think, yeah, okay, it's going to be fine, because we've got this amazing community of people, both in the organisation and outside it, supporting us to be successful. So how can we not be?
And I guess seeing it must be wonderful, working for these kinds of charities and seeing the commitment of volunteers, turning up day in, day out, come sun, come rain.
We are completely reliant on them as well. I mean, we had 8,000 volunteers last year.
Wow.
And we need 100 a day to make the operation go smoothly, to get as much food out as possible and to collect as much food as possible as well. So yeah, we love those people. They are the heroes.
Absolutely. And I guess, poverty isn't, it's not necessarily the nicest topic. It's a topic that a lot of people try to avoid, I think. Something that people don't necessarily want to talk about. And yet you guys are very committed to it, it's your lifeblood, it's your work, it's your job. And I guess why is this the cause that you have picked? Why is this the thing that you get up for every morning?
Because it's completely unacceptable, and there are so many answers and solutions, and there are so many ways that things can be better. And I think it's just, this issue more than anything else for me is something that can be fixed with the right will, with the right ideas, with the right financial investment. And it just blows my mind that, we are still here talking about this, and actually from the pandemic into the cost of living crisis, it's really, really sad how much worse things have got for families, and it's unbelievable that this is still the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about amplifying the voices of vulnerable people. That was always why I went into journalism in the first place, and I'm so privileged to work for an organisation which is actively helping people and making a difference to people's lives every day.
I've been in fundraising for about 10 years, and always worked in places where we were very privileged. I used to work for university, I've worked in medical research, but I always was really focused on trying to widen access to those things, to healthcare, to education. But it was always quite, I was taking these big, slightly intangible things. I used to work for a charity that did research into premature birth, which is something I knew nothing about before I went into the charity, and it is a phenomenal issue in the NHS. But I was raising money for something that wasn't actually going to impact people for another 20 years in terms of finding a solution. What I love about Felix is I walk into a depot, I see food, and then 2 hours later I don't see food because it's gone. And to be able to bring a donor or a prospective supporter and say, this is what your money is actually helping us do today, that to me is just fantastic. I'm a very simple person. I like the simple ideas. And I think in fundraising, you do sometimes have to take massive problems and make them digestible for people. And with Felix, I don't feel like I have to do that because the work that happens in the depot speaks entirely for itself. So that's why I like it. Wait,
Speaking briefly to the point you made about, this, how is this still a problem? And I heard a quote from Juncker, I think it was, and he'd said that politicians know how to address poverty. What they don't know how to do is get re-elected after they do that. I would add to that, there are politicians who really aren't interested in it, frankly. For me, if it's okay to say, I guess growing up, so I grew up in Stevenage, which has always been one of the poorest boroughs in the country. Teenage pregnancy, most kids are getting free school meals, but we all, it was the same, it was normality. Then I went to university where it was 50% private school, 50% state school. I thought there were 6 private schools in the whole country. I had the shock of my life, and I met amazing people and my eyes were opened. But equally, to see how people come out of the womb with their lives set on a track was devastating to me. And as a kid, being half South African, I went to apartheid South Africa when I was little. And obviously people, black population there, Indian population there, didn't have a vote. We're told where to sit, not to go onto the best beaches and all that. But on a day-to-day basis, it was the brutality of human interaction. And this is the stuff that goes with poverty as well, right? People being treated with such disrespect, such disdain, such aggression. And that was brutal. Yeah.
I think it's about what kind of country do you want to be? Who do you, where do you want to live? What do you want for the future? What do you want for your kids? What do you want for future generations? And, there are lots of things you can't fix, but I really, really passionately believe that you can fix this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true. There are a lot of things you can't fix.
There's loads of stuff I haven't got the answers to, but this one, we've all developed loads of ideas, and I just think, we can do it.
Yeah, and I guess my last question, very similar to that, is what actions can people take as individuals? Because I think it can be very scary, just you sat at home with your laptop looking at these horrifying questions. You're like, this is too big. But
go and volunteer for Felix.
Do
something.
I didn't even have to say it.
Right. But it's about doing something smaller, isn't it? Just to get in there and then seeing the change. So
Absolutely.
Help your community.
Obviously, come and volunteer for me. I would say that. But if you can make a donation to your local food bank, if you can take some time to talk to other people. I love dogs, and it's a very easy way for me to get into talking to other people. And a number of the people that I interact with who are homeless have dogs. And that is fantastic for me because it allows me to go, I love your dog, can I say hi? And then get into a conversation about how can I help? What do you need? Can I buy you a coffee? Have you got somewhere to stay tonight? And so it's those really small steps. And if you only take them with one person, I understand it can be scary to do that kind of stuff. But if you can start bringing that kind of compassion and curiosity about other people and their lives into your own kind of day-to-day, how you live your life, I genuinely think people's lives are richer for that. So, and isolation is a killer. We know that loneliness is a killer, and it works both ways. So get out and do what you can in your community, and you'll feel a ton better and like you've done something purposeful.
What about you, Natasha?
Totally agree. Do stuff in the community and think global. So if you go to our website, you can see where to donate, to facilitate, to fund the creativity, the fizzing, popping ideas that are coming out of these women and girls with the solutions, right? But also to become campaigners. And I saw a guy drop this in one of your previous episodes on the LGBT activist one, so I'm going to do it now. Speak up! So we have community campaigners who go and see their local politicians, who go and have community meetings and get people involved in campaigning. To give a tangible example, the recent horrific so-called illegal migration bill. because of campaigners not only signing the petition but then taking the next step and emailing their MPs, there was a revolt against specifically locking up pregnant asylum seekers indefinitely. I mean, how cruel is that? They knew it causes miscarriage, stillbirth, psychosis, horrific. But it wasn't a party political issue, it was a cross-party issue because people stood up throughout the House and said, it's not happening.
And finally, Isabella?
I think if you can buy a magazine, please do. It really does help our vendors and make a difference to their lives. You can also subscribe, which gives them a bit more stability. But just having a chat, just like you were saying, having a chat with them, that can make their day. But then, yeah, it does come to the wider thing. Write to your MP, go to protests, set up groups, chat to people about these issues and continue kind of spreading the message, because hopefully we will get there.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's all we've got time for now, but thank you so much, guys. I wish we could just keep going forever because I feel like we fixed it. Do you know what? Like we've come up with some solutions here. It's been really wonderful to hear, you guys talk, you guys give your incredible perspectives. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really, really wonderful to hear from you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.